Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be teaching you how to make a cozy crochet sweater. For this sweater, we went with more of a unisex design that would work well in most colors. In our case, we decided on an earthy colorway. Went with a small v-neck for a tiny bit of body shaping, and my favorite part, Suzette stitches along the shoulder and sleeves just for a hint of texture. Speaking of, if you're a fan of texture in your crochet makes, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of modern crochet designs and patterns with all the texture, including new patterns weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 375 grams of yarn, and that's 550 yards if you're stateside, and the individual measurements will be on the screen. As for tools, a 6mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you are an eater or cooker for the holidays. I am more of an eater, but looking to change that real soon. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is for size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our primary color yarn because we're going to get started with our underarm portion first. We're going to make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 6mm hook, and we're going to start by making a chain that starts about 1 inch underneath our underarm down to where we want the bottom of the sweater to be, keeping in mind that we will have a bottom band as well, so you can make this cropped or full length. I would like for mine to be full length, so I need a total of 14 inches or 36 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 50. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. Now that chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain, and now we're going to do our half double crochet row. So yarn over and insert our hook into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, with a half double. So bring your hook down and insert. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. Let's do that again. Yarn over, into that following chain, insert, pull through, yarn over, and pull through 3. Continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. Now that we've put 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one, into that last one, we're going to do an increase of 2 half double crochets. So let's all yarn over. Into that last chain, we're going to insert with 2 half double crochets. So we're going to insert with 1 half double, and then into that same last chain with a second half double crochet. And that is our increase. Now let's get started on our following row. To get started on every half double crochet row, we're going to chain 2 and flip our work. Since we're getting started with an even number row, it's going to start with an increase of 2 half double crochets, but now within the back loops. So let's all yarn over. Find that last stitch from our previous row and insert your hook into that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us. Pull through 3. Let's do that again. Yarn over into that same back loop with a second back loop half double crochet, and that is our increase for our row 2. From here, we're going to put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. So yarn over. Find that next stitch, insert into that back loop with 1 half double, yarn over into that next stitch's back loop, insert with another half double. Continue with 1 half double crochet into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one so we can increase together once more. We are back, and we should all have 1, 2, 3 rows nearly finished. We're at the end of our row 3, and we should have left our last stitch. Now we're going to do another increase of 2 back loop half double crochets together. So yarn over. Insert your hook underneath that back loop of that last stitch that we have with 1 half double, and then into that same back loop with a second half double. That is our increase and the end of our row 3 or any odd number row. And since we're here, let's just get started with our row 4 or our following even number row. So chain 2 and flip your work. It's going to start with an increase of 2 back loop half double crochets, so yarn over. Insert into that first stitch's back loop with 1 half double, and then into that same stitch's back loop with a second half double, and that's it. Right after that, put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, and then we're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until we have a portion that reaches from mid underarm. So placing the first row at mid underarm, making sure that the tail end is roughly 1 inch underneath our underarm, until these rows can reach over to mid-shoulder. Now the height does not need to reach mid-shoulder, but we just need it to be aligned with mid-shoulder so that the detail that we have when it comes to the sleeve can be seen. And I will meet you back right after an odd number row or right after our increase that ends along the top. I am back and my underarm portion is all finished. I have a total of 9 rows and its width is just about 4 inches or 10 centimeters. And now from here, we're going to start working on our shoulder portion. So this shoulder portion is going to be pretty simple. They're just going to be back loop half double crochet rows with no increases and no decreases. So from where we're at, which should be along the top, we are all going to chain 2 and flip our work. And all we're going to do is put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. So let's just do my next one together. Yarn over, find that next stitch's back loop, insert, pull through all 3, and before we follow through with any more stitches, insert a stitch marker into the edge of this first non-increase row just so we know where the shoulder starts, just to make it a little bit easier once we go in with the shoulder portion. And from here, all we're going to do is continue with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. At the end of the row, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work, and continue on with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. And we're going to continue to do this until we have a shoulder portion that can reach the edge of the base of our neck. Now the shoulder width doesn't need to physically touch the edge of the base of our neck because we are going to add Suzette stitch details to the top to make it a little bit taller. It does though need to align with the edge of your neck to ensure that we'll have enough width for the Suzette stitch detail for our shoulder. I'll meet you back right after we finish up an even number row or along the bottom to get started of the neckline portion of our front panel. I am back and my shoulder portion is all finished. I now have a total of 16 rows and my width is now 7.5 inches or 19 centimeters. We all should have ended along the bottom, and now we're going to start working on our neckline. So what we're going to do from here is chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch until we have 3 stitches left at the end of the row. And right before we move on, we just want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into our last shoulder row that we have right here, so we know where this edge is to make it a little bit easier when we go in with our detail portion later. So we've made our way up, putting 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3 stitches. Now we're going to do a decrease of 3 half double crochets. So we're all going to yarn over. We're going to insert our hook into that third to last stitch, pull through, into that second to last stitch, pull through, and now into that last stitch, pull through. We're now going to yarn over and pull through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. And that is our decrease of 3 half double crochets. Now our following row is going to start with a decrease of 3 as well. So we're going to chain 2 and flip our work. We're all going to yarn over, insert our hook into that first stitch's back loop, pull through, second stitch's back loop, pull through, third stitch's back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 5 loops, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. So from here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until this neckline portion can reach mid-chest. And I'll meet you back along the top or right after an odd number row so we can get started on the other side of our front panel. So I am back with my neckline portion. I now have a total of 21 rows. My width is now 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters. We're going to do a middle row and then we're going to mirror everything that we did on this side. So our middle row is just going to be a back loop half double crochet row with no increases and no decreases. So since we're along the top, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work, and make our way all the way down, putting 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. So just make your way all the way down with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. At the end of the row, we're going to chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one so that we can increase into that last stitch together. But right before we make our way all the way down with our middle row, we are going to insert a stitch marker into the top end of this row, just so we know which row is the middle row. I'll meet you back after our following row when we have 1 stitch left. So my middle row is finished, and I've also made my way all the way up with my back loop half double crochet row, leaving that last stitch because now we're going to do an increase of 3 back loop half double crochets, because on the other side we did a decrease of 3 back loop half double crochets. So yarn over, into that last back loop, insert with 3 half double crochets. So there's 1, there is 2, there is 3 half double crochets into that same last back loop. And just to get started on the following row, we're all going to chain 2 and flip our work. Now that our work is flipped, into that last stitch from our previous row, we're going to do another increase of 3 back loop half double crochets because we did a decrease into every row for the first neckline portion. So just into that first back loop, insert with 1, with 2, with 3 half double crochets, and 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. And from here, we're going to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as the decrease portion of our first neckline, making sure that we are not including that middle row. So just to let you guys know, I had a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these decrease rows. So I will be doing 5 of my increase rows, and then I'll meet you back to get started on the shoulder. So the increase side of my neckline is all finished. Now from here, we're going to do the shoulder, and that's going to be the same shoulder portion that we did for this side. So since we're along the top, let's all chain 2 and flip our work. And all we're going to do is put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way down. And we do want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into the top of the first and into the last shoulder row, just so we know where those corners are at. And we're going to continue to repeat our shoulder row with no increases and no decreases until we have the same amount of rows as our first shoulder portion on the other side. And when we do, we should all end along the bottom. I'll meet you back to finish up the front panel, and lastly, we're going to want to insert our stitch marker into the first and last shoulder rows. I am back. My second shoulder rows are all finished. I have a total of 34 rows now, and my width is now 14 inches or 36 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to do our underarm portion, and it's going to mirror the underarm portion that we started off with. So since we should all be along the bottom, we're going to put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 2 so that we can do a decrease of 2 together. So we put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, and into the last 2 stitches, we're going to do a decrease of 2 back loop half double crochets because on the other side of our underarm, we did an increase of 2. So yarn over, insert our hook into that second to last back loop, pull through, into that last back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 4 loops on our hook. That is our decrease of 2 back loop half double crochets. Our following row is going to start with a decrease, so let's chain 2 and flip our work. Now from here, we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into that first stitch's back loop, pull through, next stitch's back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 4, and now we're going to put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, and that's it. We're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as our first underarm portion. Once we do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back so we can get started on the back panel. So I am back, and the entirety of my front panel is finished. I have a total of 43 rows, and my width is now 18 inches or 46 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to do our back panel. It's going to be done pretty much the same way as the front panel, but we aren't going to have the decreases and increases for our neckline. And I actually already did mine, so I'm just going to talk you guys through how to do the back panel. We're all going to start by making a chain for the same amount of chains that we made when we got started on the front panel, and we're going to do the exact same underarm rows. Then from there, we're going to be putting one back loop half double crochet into every stitch, just like the shoulder portion, and we're just going to work all the way straight across to our last shoulder row. Then right after that, we're going to finish it off with the same underarm portion as the front panel. Now we just want to make sure that we are inserting our stitch marker into the first and into the last rows that we have for the shoulder. So the first and last rows where we don't do any increases or decreases, just so we know where those start and end, so that we can go in with the shoulder detail right after that. We should have the same amount of total rows and same width, and once we have the back panel finished up, I'll meet you back so we can do the shoulder portion for the front panels and then eventually the back panels. So now that our back panel is finished, we're going to get started on the prep for the front panel so that we can do the shoulder portion. So the first thing we're going to do is do a single crochet row along the top with our primary color yarn. So what we're going to do is insert our hook into the top corner stitch of the front panel. And now, working across the top of our shoulders, we're going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. And for this portion, since we are going to do our Suzette stitch right on top, it does need to end on an odd number of stitches. So if you do your single crochet row and if you end on an even number, that's completely fine. Just add 1 extra stitch into that last side row. So let's do mine together. We're all going to insert our primary color yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now this is my first side row right here. I'm going to find that top loop, insert my hook in through there with 1 single crochet. This is my following side row. I'm going to insert my hook into there with 2 single crochets. So there is 1 and there is 2. And we're going to continue doing this until we reach our following stitch marker. So let's just do the rest of mine together to make sure we're all on the same page. Into that following side row, insert with 1 single crochet. Following side row with 2 single crochets. So there's 1, there's 2. I have 1, 2, 3 more rows left to do. So into that next with 1, into the one right after that with 2. So there's 1. There's 2, and then into that last side row, this is my last one because my stitch marker's in it, but if you would also like to double check, that following row is the row where we have our increases or decreases depending on which side you're looking at. So this is the last solid row that I have. I'm going to insert my hook in through that top loop with 1 single crochet. Now like I said, this portion needs to end on an odd number of stitches. So just to count that out, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I need to end on an odd number, so I'm actually going to insert my hook into that same side row and do 1 extra single crochet for a total of 11 single crochets for mine. Now I can take the stitch marker out for now, and I'm actually going to insert it into that last single crochet that we made so that we know where the last stitch for our shoulder portion is. And now that we have that, we're going to be working down the neckline portion. Now working down the neckline, we're going to do 2 single crochets into every side row. So finding that first side row, this is mine right here, I'm going to insert my hook in through there with 2 single crochets. So there's 1 into that same top loop with a second single crochet. And again, this is my following side row. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 2 single crochets again. So there's 1 into that same top loop with a second. And we're going to continue to put 2 single crochets into every side row until we reach our side row that we have that's right before our middle row. So I went ahead and put 2 single crochets into every side row. We're now at our middle row, and all we're going to do into there, because we just want 1 middle stitch, is put 1 single crochet into that top loop, and we're going to insert our stitch marker into that single crochet. So I'm going to take this out for now. Into that middle row, I'm going to do just 1 single crochet, and be sure that you are inserting your stitch marker into the top of that stitch so we know where the middle is. Now working our way up our neckline, we're going to continue to put 2 single crochets into every side row, so we should have the same amount of single crochets as this side over here. I've made my way up my neckline, and now we're going to single crochet our way across the shoulder just like how we started off this prep row. So into that following side row, which should be our first shoulder row, I'm going to take out the stitch marker, insert my hook into that top loop with just one single crochet, and I'm also going to be inserting my stitch marker into that stitch that we just made to match this stitch marker over here. And from here, continue to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets, making our way all the way across. And if you're like me and had to add one extra stitch along the side, add one extra stitch over here as well, so that we have the same amount of stitches on both sides. So I've just single crocheted my way all the way across. I have the same 11 single crochets that I made along this side. Once we have this, we're going to do a chain up of 1 and cut. And now that we have done a chain up of 1 and cut, we're going to get started on our Suzette stitch section. So we're all going to take a look at the right shoulder portion that we have right here, making sure the work is still flipped right side up, meaning the single crochet row that we just did, the front of the single crochet row is faced up towards us, and the back, which you guys can see, it looks a little bit messier, is faced away from us. And we're going to insert our hook into that top corner stitch. Then we're going to put one single crochet into every stitch till we reach our stitch marker. And now that our single crochet row is finished, we're going to get started with our Suzette stitch row. So let's all chain 1 and flip our work. So our Suzette stitch sets is just going to be a single and double crochet into the same stitch. So getting that started, we're going to insert our hook into that first stitch that we have from our previous row with one single crochet, and then into that same stitch a double crochet. So let's all yarn over, insert into that same first stitch, pull through 2, pull through 2. That is our first Suzette stitch set. Now let's do the next one. So right after every Suzette stitch set, we are always going to skip that following stitch because that double crochet actually counts as that stitch. And if we work into there, we will be accidentally increasing. So this is my first set. We're going to skip that following stitch into the stitch right after, a single, and then also a double crochet. We should all now have 2 Suzette stitch sets. Let's do this once more together. Skip that following stitch into the next, a single, and also a double crochet, and we're going to continue to do our Suzette stitch sets until we have 2 stitches left. So we've made our way all the way down, and we should all have 2 stitches left. And into that last stitch, because we need it to be blunt, we're just going to be inserting 1 half double crochet into that stitch. So let's all yarn over. Skip that following stitch, which is our second to last, and then into that last stitch, insert with a half double crochet. So insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3, and that is going to be how we end all of our Suzette stitch rows. Let's do the next row, so let's chain 1 and flip our work. Now getting started on our row 2 for our Suzette stitch set. Let's find that last stitch from our previous row, which is the top of that half double crochet, and insert with a single and with a double crochet. And just like our previous row, we're going to skip that following stitch and into the stitch right after that, a single and a double. And just as a really quick tip, each of our Suzette stitch sets are now going to be worked into our previous row's single crochet stitch to get the texture that we want. And we can tell that our previous row's single crochet is the one that we should be working into because it's a little bit shorter than that following stitch. So skip 1 into the next with a single and double crochet. And we're going to continue this until we have 2 stitches left again. So we are nearly at the end of our second Suzette stitch row. You should all have 2 stitches left, and now, just like how we closed off our first Suzette stitch row, we're going to yarn over, skip that second to last stitch, and into the last 1 half double crochet. And that is it. From here, we're just going to continue to repeat this row all the way up until this reaches the top of our shoulder. And I will meet you back right after an odd number of rows, and that is including our first single crochet row with our secondary color. And just to make sure that the measurement is the same as when we started the piece off with, we're going to want to make sure that the tail end for our underarm is still remaining about 1 inch underneath our underarm. I'll meet you back when we have this all finished up right after we do a chain up of 1 and cut. So I am back with my first shoulder portion. I have a total of 9 rows, and that is including my first single crochet row with our primary color yarn. And we're going to repeat everything that we just did here on the other side. We're just going to start by inserting our hook into the stitch that's nearest to our neckline. we're doing it this way so that the single crochet row for our secondary color yarn shows the front instead of the back, because as you guys can see a little bit earlier, the back can look a little bit messy. But continue on with this until we have the same amount of rows. And then I'll meet you back so we can do the same thing across the top of the back panel. So we have just finished up both shoulder portions for the front panels. We're actually going to be doing the same thing for the back panel, so let's take a look at that. So taking a look at the back panel, we're going to start with our prep row with our primary color yarn. So we're all going to start by inserting our hook into the top corner stitch of the back panel, which is the corner stitch of our first shoulder row, so the first row that doesn't have any increases or decreases. And now we're going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets, working our way all the way across till we reach our last shoulder row. Now just like the front panel, if we end up with an even number of stitches, just add 1 extra stitch to that last side row because we need to end on an odd number. When we have that, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back to talk you through how to do the rest. Now we have just finished up our single crochet prep row with our primary color yarn. We're now going to basically repeat everything that we did for the shoulder. So we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of the shoulder portion that we just did. We're going to insert our secondary color yarn, do our single crochet row, so just 1 single crochet into every stitch, should still be an odd number of stitches, and then we're going to do our Suzette stitches all the way down, making sure that we close off every row with a half double crochet, so exactly the same way as the front panel shoulders, just obviously a little bit wider. We're going to continue that until we have the same amount of rows as the front panel, then do a chain up of 1 and cut. I am back and I have just finished up the shoulder portion for my back panel. I have the same amount of rows as my front panel, and I did do a chain up of 1 and cut, and now we're going to seam everything together. So let's grab our front panel. So placing our front panel on top of our back panel, we want to make sure that the back of the front panel is faced up towards us, and the back of the back panel is faced away from us, so that once we flip it inside out, all of our seams are going to be along the inside. And then we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're now going to insert our primary color yarn onto our hook, pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure, and now we're going to do a single crochet row, working into both the front and the back panel at the same time. So let's all insert our hook into that next stitch into the front panel, into the next stitch into the back panel, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Let's do this again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert, into that next stitch into the back panel, here we go, insert, and single crochet. And that's pretty much it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back to seam the shoulders. So now that our side seam is all finished up, we're going to seam our shoulders. So that's going to be pretty simple. It's going to be done the exact same way. So we're still going to make sure that our work is flipped the wrong side out, meaning the seaming that we have for the sleeve is still along the outside. Then we're going to insert our hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then we're going to grab our secondary color yarn. We're going to insert that onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and we're going to do another single crochet seam. So find that next stitch into the front panel, insert your hook, next stitch into the back panel, insert your hook, and single crochet. Let's do that again. Next stitch into the front panel, insert, next stitch into the back panel, insert, and single. And that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into the front panel. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So now that everything is all seamed up, we're ready to get started on our sleeve. So we're now going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, meaning all of our seams that we have are along the inside. And then we're going to be inserting our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam. Then we're going to grab our primary color yarn to do a single crochet row up the underarm. We are going to insert our primary color yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And from here, we're going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row until we reach our single crochet row with our primary color right over here. So let's get that started. This is my first side row right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 1 single crochet. And if you're like me, you should have some tail ends. I'm just going to place all of those tail ends over my hook so that I don't have to weave them in later. and we're just going to single crochet around everything, just like that. Now let's find our following side row. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert my hook in through that top loop and insert with 2 singles. So there is 1, and then into that same top loop, there is 2 single crochets. And we're going to continue to alternate between 1 to 2, making our way all the way up. And then I'll meet you back right before we work into that side single crochet row with our primary color. And now that we've single crocheted our way all the way up our underarm, into that side single crochet row that we have with our primary color yarn, we're going to insert our hook into that side loop with 1 single crochet. Oh, let's do that again, just like that. And now from here, we're going to do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then we're going to continue on with our single crochet row, but now with our secondary color yarn. So I just did a chain up of 1 and cut with my primary color yarn. What we're going to do from here is insert our hook into that last single crochet that we made so that we can connect this portion of our single crochet row with the next portion of our single crochet row. So I'm going to insert my yarn onto my hook and pull through. And now we're going to continue on with our single crochet row, working our way up our shoulder. And we're connecting it this way so that we don't have a gap in between this last single crochet with our primary color and the following single crochet with our secondary color. So from here, we're going to find that side single crochet row that we have with our secondary color yarn. We're going to insert our hook into that top loop, starting with just 1 single crochet. So insert with 1 single crochet. And just to let you guys know, that last single crochet that we did with our primary color yarn, it still counts as a stitch even though our secondary color yarn is worked into it. Now from here, working our way up our shoulder, we're going to continue with our single crochet row, just like how we did the underarms. So still alternating between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. So we just put 1 single crochet into this side row that we have right here. So into that following side row, we're going to insert with 2 single crochets. So we're going to insert with 1, and then into that same side row, insert with 2 single crochets. So pretty much the same deal as the underarm. Let's do this again. Into my following side row, this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert my hook with just 1 single. And then into my following side row, which is this one right here, insert with 2 singles. So there's 1 and there's 2. And that's it. We're going to continue this until we are worked into the last side row that we have right before our shoulder seam. Then we're going to do a chain up of 1 and cut because our sleeves are going to be worked into 2 panels. So our single crochet prep row for our sleeve is all finished. Once we reached our shoulder seam, we did do a chain up of 1 and cut. Now from here, we're going to insert our hook into the chain 1 space that we made when we started off this prep row with our primary color yarn. And we want to make sure that we're inserting a hook into that chain space instead of that first stitch because we don't want to miss out on that first stitch. And now we're all going to make an odd number chain the length that we'd like for our sleeve to be. And now that we have our chain, we're going to do our first half double crochet row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And now we're going to do a half double crochet row. So yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3, and continue with 1 half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last chain. So we've put 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one, and now we're going to do an increase together. Now we're going to do an increase of 3 half double crochets so that once we work our way up to the Suzette stitch detail portion, we're going to have the right amount of stitches. So what we're going to do is yarn over. We're going to insert our hook into that last chain with 1 half double, into that same last chain with a second half double, and then into that same last chain with a third half double crochet. And now from here, we're going to slip stitch it into the base. So we're all going to start by counting up 2 stitches. So there's 1 and there's 2. Connecting any of our odd number rows to the base, we're going to count up 2 stitches and slip stitch into that second stitch into the base. And now our row 1 or our odd number row is finished. Now to work our way up to the following row, which is another back loop half double crochet row, we're going to slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, Neither of those slip stitches into the base count as a stitch, and we're now going to flip our work. Now for every even number row for the sleeve, it's just going to be 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. So no increases and no decreases into any of our even number rows. So just yarn over, find that last stitch from our previous row, insert into that back loop with 1 back loop half double, and that's it. Continue with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, and continue with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one so we can increase together once more. We are back, and we should all have 1, 2, 3 rows nearly finished. We're now at the end of our row 3, leaving that last stitch, and into that last stitch we're going to insert into that back loop with another increase of 3 back loop half double crochets. So yarn over into that stitch's back loop with 1 back loop half double, into that same last back loop with a second half double, and then into that same back loop with a third half double crochet. And we're now going to connect it into the base. So let's all count up 1, 2 available stitches into that second stitch, insert with a slip stitch to close off our row 3 or any odd number row. Now just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base. Neither of those slip stitches count as a stitch. We're going to flip our work and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. So just like our previous even number row, our even number rows are not going to have any increases or decreases. And from here, all we're going to do is continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have just 1 stitch left with our primary color yarn. And then I'll meet you back to do that last row, and then how we're going to work our way up the shoulder portion. So I have worked my way all the way up until I am at my last stitch that I have with my primary color yarn. And just to show you, it does look like it is taken up, but it's just because we inserted our secondary color into that stitch. And also, just as a really quick tip, just so we all know that we have the right amount of rows, the amount of rows that we have for our sleeve right now should be the same amount of rows that we have for our underarm portion. So for those of you that have my numbers, I did a total of 9 underarm rows. So for my sleeve, I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rows, and we all should have ended along the base. Now from here, we're going to do a following single crochet row, just working our way all the way down. And then we're going to switch out our colors, and then we're going to do our Suzette stitches for our sleeve detail. So since we should all be along the base, what we're going to do is insert our hook into that last stitch that we have. So it should be that stitch that our secondary color is also into. Yarn over, pull through, that slip stitch still doesn't count as a stitch. And then we're going to do a single crochet row. So flip your work. And all we're going to do is put 1 regular single crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way to the end of the row. When we make our way to the end of the row, we are going to chain 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back with our secondary color yarn. And just to double check, this single crochet row should end on an odd number of stitches because we need to have an odd number of stitches to get started on our Suzette stitch rows. So our single crochet row with our primary color is all finished. Now we're going to insert our hook into the outer corner stitch, and then we're going to insert our secondary color yarn. We're going to pull our secondary color yarn through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and since we insert our hook into that first stitch, we're going to be inserting into that same first stitch with 1 single crochet because that chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch. So go ahead and insert your hook, and if you'd like to weave in your tail ends as you go, place your tail ends over your hook and single crochet, and all we're going to do is just put 1 single crochet into every stitch. Alright, so we've made our way all the way down with our single crochet row with our secondary color yarn. Now we're going to slip stitch it into the base. So all we're going to do is find that next available stitch into the base, which should be that first stitch with our secondary color yarn, and insert your hook into that stitch, pull through everything, and now this first row is connected. Now we're going to get started on the following row, which is now going to be a Suzette stitch row because we want our detail to be aligned within the front panel, back panel, and the sleeve. So in order to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, and flip our work. Now those 2 slip stitches don't count as a stitch, that's just to connect our work. Now finding the last single crochet that we did from our previous row, we're going to insert with a single, and then also with a double crochet. That is our first Suzette stitch set. Now it's going to be done pretty much the same way as the shoulder. So we're going to skip one, into the next, insert with a single and double, and we're going to continue this until we reach the end of the row, making sure that once we have only 2 stitches left, we're ending the row with a half double crochet. Now right after that last half double crochet stitch for this first Suzette stitch row, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and then work our way back down with our Suzette stitch set, and I will meet you back when we have 2 stitches left because we're going to need to do an increase. So I am back and we are nearly finished with our 1, 2, 3 rows. We should all have 2 stitches left, and into that last stitch we're going to do an increase of 3 half double crochets. So that's going to be done the same way as the half double crochet row portion. So all we're going to do is yarn over. We're going to skip that following stitch, and into that next stitch, which should be the last stitch from our previous row, we're going to insert with 1 half double, with 2 half double, and then with 3 half double crochet. And now connecting it into the base for this section is going to be the same way that we connected it for the half double crochet row section. So let's get that started. We're all going to skip 1 stitch and into the second, insert with a slip stitch to connect this row. And just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base, flip our work, and every odd number row, we are not going to do an increase. So we're just going to do our Suzette stitch sets, making our way all the way down, making sure that we close off the row with a half double crochet, and that's it. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we don't have any more rows left to work into. So it should be worked into that last stitch along the top. When we have that, do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so I'm back and I have made my way all the way up to my last stitch that I have, and I did do a chain up of 1 and cut. And now one side of our sleeve is all finished up, and now we're actually going to be doing the exact same thing that we just did here, but on the other side of our armhole. And we're just doing it this way because the amount of stitches that we have for each of our sections may be a little bit different for everyone, causing for the seams to possibly have more stitches than the other side. So we just want to do this to make sure that it'll all even out. So all we're going to do is just flip our work over. Then we're going to repeat everything exactly the same. So a single crochet row starting with our primary color yarn, then our secondary color yarn, then we're going to do our half double crochets with our single crochet row with our primary color, then starting our secondary color section, do 1 single crochet row with our secondary color, and then our Suzette stitch rows with the increase all the way up until we don't have any more stitches left. And then I will meet you back so that we can seam the top and the bottom of our sleeve together. Alright, so I'm back and I've just finished up both of my panels for my sleeve. They're both done exactly the same way. And now we're going to seam it, starting with the top of our sleeve. And we're going to be using our secondary color for that. So let's all flip our work wrong side out first. So we're all going to start by inserting our hook into the last stitch that we have for our shoulder seam, and that's just to make sure that once we work into the first stitch into the front and into the back panel, we don't have a gap in between the body and the sleeve. So insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now let's find that first stitch into the front panel. Now I have a bunch of tail ends, so I'll try to move that out of the way, but this is my first stitch right here. I'm going to insert my hook. Now taking a look at the back panel, I'm going to find my first stitch there, insert my hook, and I would like to weave in my tail ends as I go, so I'm going to place all my tail ends over my hook, and I'm going to single crochet. Let's do that again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert in through that next stitch, into that next stitch into the back panel, insert your hook in through there, and single crochet. That's pretty much it. We're going to continue this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then we're going to repeat everything that we just did here, but for the bottom of our sleeve using our primary color. So I'll meet you back when this seam is finished up, just to talk you through how we're going to do the bottom. So our single crochet row with our secondary color along the top of our sleeve is all finished. Now we're going to single crochet across the bottom. So making sure that our work is still flipped wrong side out, we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. And we're going to do the same single crochet seam. So go ahead and insert your primary color yarn onto your hook. We're going to pull our yarn through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and just to do the first one, we're going to find that first stitch into the front panel, insert your hook, first stitch into the back panel, insert your hook, and single crochet, and we're going to continue this until we don't have any more stitches left. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. So now that our sleeve is all seamed up, we're ready to get started on our cuff. So we're going to flip our work right side out, and then we're going to insert our hook into any one of the side rows along the bottom of our sleeve. Then we're all going to take our secondary color yarn, place that onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and now all we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into every side row, and that's into every side half double crochet row, our 2 side single crochet rows, and then our side Suzette stitch rows as well. So just to do the first one, this is my first side row. I'm going to insert my hook in through there with 1 single crochet. This is my following side row. I'm going to insert my hook in through there with another single crochet, and that's it. We're going to make our way all the way around and then slip stitch into that chain space. So now that our single crochet row along the bottom of our sleeve is finished, we're now going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our cuff to be. I'd like for mine to be roughly 3 inches or 8 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 12. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain, do a chain 1, and then into that chain that we blocked off, the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch, yarn over, and pull through everything on our hook. Let's do that again. Into that next chain, insert, yarn over, pull through everything. And we just want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the falling row could be too tight to work into, and continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. Now that we've put 1 slip stitch into every chain, we're now at the base and we're going to connect it into the base. So all we're going to do is find that next stitch into the base, slip stitch it into there. That slip stitch does not count as a stitch, that's just to work our way into the base. And then to work our way up to the following row, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. That slip stitch also doesn't count as a stitch, and flip our work. And we're now going to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So let's all start by finding that next stitch and insert into that back loop. Gently yarn over, pull through everything, and again into that next stitch's back loop. Insert, yarn over, pull through everything. Continue with 1 back loop slip stitch after every stitch. At the end of the row, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and I'll meet you back at the base. So we are back, and we should all have 1, 2, 3 rows nearly finished. And now we're going to connect it into the base just once more. So into that next stitch into the base, we're going to insert, yarn over, pull through everything with a slip stitch. And then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work, and repeat with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And we're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows with no increases and no decreases, making our way all the way around. And then I'll meet you back when we don't have any more stitches left to work into, so we can seam our cuffs together. So now that we've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows, we're now going to seam our cuff together. So we all want to make sure that our work is slipped right side out and right side up. Then we're going to be inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through everything on our hook and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam. So to do the first one, we're all going to find that first stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. Find that next stitch into the back panel and insert only into that back loop. Then yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. There's our first one, let's do the next. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop. Then yarn over, pull through everything, and just once more. Next stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. Next stitch into the back, insert into that back loop, yarn over, and pull through everything. Well, we've made our way all the way down, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat everything that we just did here on the other side. So now that our cuffs are all seamed up, we're now ready to get started on the bottom band. So we're going to make sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, and we're going to insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our piece. Next, we're going to insert our primary color yarn onto our hook and start with a single crochet row. So we're going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And just like how we did the bottom of the cuff, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side row. When we make our way all the way around, slip stitch into that chain space and then do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then get your secondary color ready. So now that we've made our way all the way around with our primary color, we did do a chain up of 1 and cut, and now we're going to do another single crochet row, but now with our secondary color yarn. So go ahead and insert your hook into any one of the stitches that we have along the bottom. Insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and make your way all the way around, putting 1 single crochet into every stitch, then slip stitch into that chain space. So now that our second single crochet row along the bottom is all finished with our secondary color yarn, we're now going to do a slip stitch bottom band, which is going to be done exactly the same way as our cuff. So right after we've slip stitched into that chain space, we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our bottom band to be. Now I'd like for mine to be roughly 3 inches or 8 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making chain 12, just like my cuff. And since we already know how to do this, I'm just going to get started on this section with you. So right after we have our chain, block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a slip stitch. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, and continue putting 1 slip stitch into every chain, remembering not to tug too tightly after every stitch. And now that we're back at the base, we're going to slip stitch it into the base. So we're going to start by finding that next available stitch into the base, insert, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. That slip stitch into the base does not count as a stitch, we just wanted to connect it. And just to work our way up to the following row, into that next available stitch into the base, insert your hook with a slip stitch, flip our work, and now with our back loop slip stitch rows, so into that last stitch from our previous row, insert into that back loop, yarn over and pull through everything, and continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, we're all going to chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and then when we make it back down to the base, connect it into the base the same way that we just did. And all we're going to do is continue to repeat these 2 rows with no increases and no decreases until we don't have any more stitches left to work into, and then I'll meet you back to seam our bottom band together. So I've now made my way all the way around with my bottom band. Now from here we don't have any more stitches left to work into, so we're going to seam it up as well. So this is going to be the same seam that we did for the cuff, so let's all make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, and then we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, yarn over, pull through everything, and since we already know how to do our outside loop slip stitch seam, let's just do the first one. We're all going to start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert into that front loop. Find that first stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything, and continue this until we don't have any more stitches left. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. And now that our bottom band is finished, we're now going to do our collar. So we're going to make sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, and we're going to insert our hook into any one of the stitches that we have along the back of our neckline. And taking our secondary color yarn, we're going to insert that onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and we're going to start with a single crochet row. So that's going to be pretty simple. Along the top of the back of our neckline, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every stitch. Now once we reach the front panel, working our way down our shoulders, we're going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row, 1 single crochet into our single crochet row with our secondary color yarn, and then continue on with 1 single crochet into every stitch. And then once we reach the shoulder portion, same as this side, so alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. Make your way all the way around with our single crochet row and then slip stitch into that chain space. So we've made our way all the way around with our neckline, and now we're going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our collar to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 4. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain, do a chain 1, and then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a slip stitch, just like how we did for our bottom band and our cuff. And that's it. We're going to do our same bottom band and cuff back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases, making sure that we're connecting it into the base the same way that we did for those other 2 sections. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I will meet you back so that we can seam everything together. So we are back and we have made our way all the way around with our collar. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're going to seam it, and the seam is going to be the same as our cuff and our bottom band. So making sure that our work is slipped right side up, we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then we're all going to yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, and just to do the first one, we're all going to start by finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop, find that first stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, then yarn over, pull through all three, and continue this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of one and cut. So now that our collar is all seamed up, we are all done. The last thing we're going to have to do is weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Bye!